Good afternoon, class. My name is Danny Munoz, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you all here today. The focus of this week's lesson is specifically on leadership. And the prompt for this particular video is power and negotiation as it relates to leadership styles. So what I thought we would do is just start with the discussion of power and negotiation and how that impacts different leadership styles. And I'm curious to see what your thoughts are after we finish the discussion. But first, to start specifically with types of power. So the text describes 5 different types of power. 3 of them are organizational in nature, and 2 of them are personal in nature. The 3 organizational types of power that are described are legitimate power, reward power, and coercive power. These 3 types of powers usually extend specifically from an organization. Right, so they have to do with a hierarchy of authority, like a manager and employee type relationship. Right, there's authority given to the manager to exercise that particular power over his or her employees. And reward and coercive are the same way. Reward is more benefits that come from the adoption of that particular influence on the part of the employees, and coercive is more maybe punitive. Right, negative consequences, if you will, of not following, the influence from the particular leader in question. The other 2 types of power are described as personal, and these types of power are the types of power that maybe individuals can have in and of themselves. Right, it's been said in this class, and I think in other classes, that you don't have to have authority to be a leader. You can be a leader without authority if you have the right traits. And I think that's what the 2 personal types of power specifically refer to. They are expert and referent power, which come from either expertise in a particular field that others want, or referent power, kind of in that same token, right? It's a skill that is desired, and so it kind of gives you power over another individual. And so leadership specifically is the use of power and influence to direct activities of followers towards a particular goal or objective. And again, in chapter 13, which I found to be very interesting, leaders can use many different tactics to exercise that power and influence. Of the 10 different tactics described, there was 4 specifically that were described as very effective, and then there was 2 that were described as the least effective, with 4 others being right in the middle. Of the 4 most effective ones, they were rational, consultation, inspirational, and collaboration. Of the least effective, they were pressure and forming of coalitions. And so as I think about these 2 types of power, what comes to mind is the first 4 speak of kind of sitting along the same side, or sitting on the same side of the table, if you will, as the person who you're trying to exercise power over. So think about appealing to something that is mutually beneficial, for the employee, if you will, or working together to find the best way to accomplish something, right? So you're sitting on the same side of the table, if you will, as the employee that you're trying to exercise power over. Whereas the 2 least effective tactics described in the text were pressure and forming of coalitions, which kind of speak to more of a punitive type of power, right? Whereas you have to do this or else, or kind of in the forming of a coalition to kind of maybe create a group of people to exercise that power, if you will, or kind of a group that is going to force a particular objective, if you will. And so again, I think most people, when I think about my own role as an employee, I'm much more willing and excited about doing something when it's towards a kind of a common end or a common goal where I feel I'm on the same side as leadership. Whereas if I'm directed to do something that maybe I have a disagreement with, which is going to happen from time to time in any job, again, I think you're you're less motivated to execute at a high level when you feel pressure without explanation, or when you feel it's do this or else. I think people are generally going to, to want to resist that kind of influence. And so, as you think about power, the other side to that coin is negotiation. And negotiation is described in 4 specific steps, which are prepare, exchange information, bargain, and then close and commitment. And negotiation kind of, in my opinion, falls along the lines of kind of the first, kind of the first side of that coin, which are what's the best way to kind of motivate employees to do something. Is it going to be tell them to do this or else, or is it going to be to kind of negotiate with them to create a mutually beneficial set of circumstances, right, where all parties come out better than they were before? I think that's a common theme in, this class and many other classes, if you're part of the same degree program that I'm in, which is kind of a free market is based on the mutually beneficial exchange of goods and services, right? I'm willing to pay money for something if I'm going to be better for whatever product or service I get for it at the end. And the person selling it to me is also going to be better in that exchange as well, right? So that's where I think kind of negotiation comes into play. And so how does all this relate to leadership styles, right? Well, in under the umbrella of leadership styles, there were 4 styles described. There were autocratic, consultative, facilitative, and delegative. And as you think about those 4 leadership styles, the text also states that each style has its own pros and cons. And there are also certain styles that are better or worse for certain situations, along with different leadership styles. But when you think about kind of the 2 main branches of leadership described in the text, they are transactional and transformational. So transactional is more short-term, right? Do this objective that's 5 feet in front of you without necessarily seeing the long-term end or the company's vision. It's described as more carrot and stick, so short-term reward or short-term negative consequences, whereas transformational leadership describes a leader who's able to fundamentally change the way that employees view their job. So the way that I kind of see that, there was a class that I took earlier in the semester where we looked at different leadership styles, and we had to pick from a group of leaders and kind of write a paper on them on which of those leaders was most effective. And the one that I chose was Walt Disney. Walt Disney was able to create a long-term vision for the company that made his employees want to achieve that particular vision, right? So it wasn't necessarily take this step for this short-term benefit or take this step to avoid this short-term consequence. It was more him describing his long-term vision for what he wanted the company to be, and having that be a vision that everyone could jump on board with as a positive outcome for themselves and the world around them. So everybody worked towards that end. And so, again, a good transformational leader is one who instills, kind of inspires positive inspiration, if you will, positive influence coming from a place of getting everybody marching in the same direction as opposed to some short-term goal. And so, again, as I go back to the main prompt, how does power and negotiation relate to different leadership styles? Again, there are different forms of power that extend either from an individual or extend from an organization. And then there's different kinds of ways that you can use that power for influence, such as negotiation. And again, I think each of those then also influence the different leadership styles. So as I think about how power and negotiation relates to leadership styles, I think they're kind of one and the same, right? You can use the tools of power and negotiation differently depending upon the leadership style that you're trying to incorporate into that particular decision or objective. And then again, different styles of leadership are going to be useful for different objectives and outcomes. And I think the most effective leaders are those who recognize the different tools at their disposal, know when specifically to use the different forms of influence, along with the different leadership styles, depending upon the objective that they're trying to achieve. Thank you so much.